For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the Insurrection. I'm Michael Lauber. This is Derrick Evans. It's Monday. We survived the weekend, and we have a great show lined up for you guys today.
Absolutely. And most importantly, we are 1 week closer to getting President Trump back in the Oval Office where he belongs. And try to save our country from these globalist warmongers who are trying to get us to World War III. But, man, we got an awesome show lined up for you guys. As always, like, share, subscribe. If you're watching live, leave a comment. We'll do our best to include you guys in the show. And with that, man, we got an awesome two guests here, Alex Newman and Andrew Muller. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, guys.
Well, yeah, thanks. And both you guys did some just fantastic work. You guys just got back from Azerbaijan from the COP29 summit. And that's really going to be our main focus today. But there are two stories we want to address before we jump into that. And one I hadn't even heard about. So, Derrick, if you could take it away on that, I'm going to finish getting one thing set up and we'll dig into the rest.
Yeah. Well, quick shout out to Angel in the Twitter chat and Dan Dreyer over here in the Rumble chat already popping it off. But yeah, over the weekend, National File broke a story. A lot of people are aware, of Hurricane Helene devastating North Carolina and many other areas. Amish people went to North Carolina, built these tiny homes for the people in North Carolina. So they had some shelter, a roof over their heads. They're staying in tents right now. The winter months are rolling around. It's getting cold. The North Carolina state government actually put out a report I don't know what you call it, a declare that these people are not allowed to stay in these tiny homes because they were not built to the current building code standards of North Carolina. So they're actually kicking these people out of the tiny homes that the Amish people built, and they're kicking them out to nothing. So they'd rather these people live in a tent and freeze to death than they would stay in a tiny home that was built by Amish people because it was not up to their standards. And this is a real story. It's mind-blowing, and this kind of broke over the weekend.
Yeah, and to me, that just it shows us this pure hypocrisy. Like you said, better to have them freeze to death than to maybe live in a house for a few weeks, have shelter, but it didn't go through the proper channels, proper regulations. It kills me. We were talking off air right before we jumped on that I had seen the other end of this story last week on Thursday or Friday. A couple journalists were down there reporting that the Amish volunteered their time, brought the materials down, built these houses for 200 plus people. And, it looked like a great thing. These people were, not having to stay in these junky, dilapidated FEMA trailers. They were finally getting some of the help they really needed. And again, the fact that these people took their own money, their own treasure, went down there and did something. And then to find out our government just slaps us all in the face. Any thoughts on that, Andrew or Alex?
It's funny, Mike, when you guys were talking about this before we went live, I went on X and I looked up the story. And of course, we know the Amish are, incredibly well known for their craftsmanship, for the way they make things out of wood. And I have an Amish nightstand sitting by my bed. I have some Amish furniture. I mean, this stuff is incredibly well built. And when you go and look at these tiny homes, they're not like little crates or little, shipping containers that they cut out a door. I mean, these are high quality. They have very nice architecture. They have very custom colored sidings and porches and windows. And I mean, they're beautiful tiny homes. So, I mean, the government has the audacity to tell a beaver how to make a dam, and if he's doing it improperly. I mean, that's the way I see this. And it just shows that our government really doesn't care about people. They don't really care about people's well-being. They just care about money. They care about taxation. They care about control. And to me, telling the Amish that they didn't build their homes according to code, I mean, that's what these people are known for. That is their renowned craft. So the hypocrisy and just the wickedness of government is on full display here. And of course, I can't prove this. I don't know this, but it almost makes you wonder, is this the government's revenge hit on the Amish for coming out big for Trump in Pennsylvania? So who knows? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought about that, but it wouldn't be surprised. I'd expect a lot of them to get IRS audits this year too, as sick as that is.
I couldn't help but think of Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, the great libertarian economist, author, fiction writer, thinker, philosopher. She had the formula through which you can know if your society, your civilization is doomed. And the first one in the list was when you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing, you may know that your society is doomed. So here we have the people who are building things need to ask permission from bureaucrats who literally do nothing of value. They produce nothing of value. They don't grow food. They don't build houses. They don't build cars. They do nothing. So according to Ayn Rand's formula, we're pretty close to the doom phase. So hang on for the ride, guys.
Absolutely. And before we move on, I think the reason they're doing it is, I don't know how much they are charging per FEMA trailer to rent out, but there's some money laundering obviously going through with all the scams going on through FEMA. But you take 200 FEMA trailers out of the contract there, that probably is a pretty significant portion of money. And I have to wonder if they're not, that's not part of the motive for doing this, because they want the money that's associated with the 200 plus trailers that they're no longer needing because the Amish built these homes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot less skids that can be greased along the way. And I guess, their Ukrainian money laundering operation is coming to an end shortly. So they're desperate. The other story I just wanted to touch on, just because I thought it was hilarious, is I make jokes all the time about the left running off to their cry closets. Well, we found out over the weekend they had a formal cry-in at the White House because of how the election went. And again, it wasn't televised, but the fact of the matter is these just losers, these just incompetent little manlets, had to have a cry session because of how the 2024 election went. They can't get on with dealing with reality or why they lost or anything else. It's time to just go in the corner and cry.
I couldn't believe it when you actually said that. I mean, that they had a formal, cross session there at the thing. That is unbelievable. I want to give a quick shout out to Kelly Song and KP over in Rumble Chat. Appreciate you guys for tuning in.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, the work that you guys just did over at the COP29 summit is amazing, and it's something I don't feel like is getting enough attention here. A little bit here and there, mentions on the media, but otherwise it kind of, to me at least, feels like it's largely being ignored. And there are a few things you guys told me that were just unbelievable when we were filming your episode for over the weekend, Alex. So I want to make sure I have this right. So prior to Trump being elected, they were expecting to get funding on the order of $3 trillion per year. Is that right?
Yeah, well, they were throwing out all kinds of incredible numbers. You had people demanding $5 trillion per year. You had people demanding $11 trillion per year. They did finally get to an agreement this weekend, and you're probably not surprised to know, Mike, $1.3 trillion per year is the final number they settled on. That's what it's going to ramp up to by 2035. In the meantime, $300 billion per year, up from $100 billion per year agreed the last time they went at this. But even more significant than the trillions of dollars, which, by the way, will be extracted from you, Mr. and Mrs. American middle class person. They also agreed for the first time ever to the global rules for carbon markets. And I don't think people are understanding how significant this is. This isn't just like, oh, your electric bill is going to go up a little bit every month. No. They are going to ratchet these down to the point where you will have a massive scarcity in carbon credits. Carbon credits will cost a fortune, and they will become the basis for the entire technocratic economy, right? We're used to using cash and money as our medium of exchange, as the store of value. As this system gets ramped up, and by the way, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, Trump's the president now, so all this is going to go up in smoke. Don't be so sure. Yes, Trump has got the right understanding of this. Trump's instincts are right on this. But best case scenario, he's in there for 4 years. Don't think they haven't planned for the long term. They've got this all worked out. They just now announced that they're going to be adding climate brainwashing into the international standardized test. So they've got a plan to keep this scam going long after Trump is gone. And if you look at some of the people in the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, they're fully on board with the conservative version of the climate scam. You had 5 Republicans show up at the COP29, 5 Republican members of Congress. Every single one of them embraced the absolutely preposterous notion that the gas we exhale is pollution that needs to be reduced. So, folks, trust me, you're going to pay for this. You're going to pay big. And unless Donald Trump somehow gets a chainsaw and cuts this whole thing to the ground, it's not going away just because he's the president.
Yeah, and I want to put this in perspective for everybody real quick. So at you said 1.3 trillion is the amount they settled on.
Yep. So
that, let me do some back of the napkin math here real quick. So that's about $3,500 per U.S. taxpayer, and that's at the minimum level. Whereas what they wanted originally was roughly $10,000 per U.S. taxpayer to cover their little climate change fantasy here.
Yep. And keep in mind, all of that money is going to be extracted from a middle class that is being quite literally decimated, right? So we're expected to hand over all this money while they are destroying our industries, while they are stopping energy exploration and extraction, while they are shutting down our factories and shipping them to China. So this is a looting operation where they're basically looting a corpse. They're removing our ability to produce wealth, and they're taking away from us the little bit that we still have, to send it to communist China, to send it to the BRICS, to send it to the kleptocrats who rule the third world. So I think a lot of people don't pay attention to this story, Mike and Derrick, because they still follow the fake media for their cues on what's important. This is one of the most important stories. The climate scam underpins the entire global transformation. The move toward a one world political system, the move toward a technocratic global economy, the move toward a united one world religious system that is, by the way, very out in the open at this point. All of it is 100% underpinned by the climate scam. If the climate scam dies, all the rest of the stuff falls into ashes. So the reason you're not hearing about this stuff in America is because they know that we, the bitter clingers of America, don't believe it. They've done the polling. They know that most Americans don't even believe that human activities are causing climate change. So they know better to keep quiet about it, brainwash the kids, wait till Trump is safely out of office, and then we'll get back to the hysteria once those bitter clingers die off and go to nursing homes.
So I got 2 questions here. The first one is, like, who like formally made this decision? Is this just Joe Biden as a president? And then the second thing is, like, what exactly is this money going towards? I mean, $1.3 trillion a year, dude. I mean, as an average middle class American, it's hard to really truly wrap your mind around how much money that truly is. What is the money, supposed to be going for? Do we know?
Very good questions, Derrick. And they make this process deliberately obscure because they don't want people to understand it, right? Yeah. They want people to say, wow, that's really confusing. And I don't want to sound stupid, so I just won't ask the questions. I'll just trust that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the first question, who made this decision? Well, this was a decision that was adopted by all the governments in the world that came together in Azerbaijan. Andrew and I were there. We didn't stay to the very end because, it's always the same scam and it costs a lot of money. Yeah. But all the governments of the world essentially approved this final agreement on Sunday. And what that means is they got together in this massive plenary hall. The UN and the host government said, all right, guys, here's the final draft of this agreement. Do we have any objections? Does anybody object? And a bunch of the third world kleptocrats, oh, we're insulted. How dare you only offer us 1.3 trillion? We demand more. But when it all was said and done, they all said, okay, fine, we'll take it. They'll come back for more next year. So all the governments in the world, including the Biden administration, agreed to this international agreement. Now, it hasn't been ratified by the Senate, and it won't be ratified by the Senate, because what they have done here, a nifty little scam. They said, well, the U.S. Senate ratified the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change back in 92. And so these are all just supplemental agreements to that treaty. So your Senate already ratified it. So we're just going to keep doing this and doing this and doing this. So that's who made the decision. Where does the money go to? That is the $50 trillion question. Nobody can give you a straight answer on this. We asked a lot of people, and we got some hilarious responses. It was, so peace plus $1 trillion. Well, what are you going to do with the $1 trillion? First, we get the $1 trillion, right? Wait, what? First, you get the $1 trillion, then you're going to tell us where it goes. But the long story short is this is going to go into the bank accounts of third world kleptocrats. This is going to go into hiring more police and military to oppress the people of the third world. This is going to go into the non-governmental organizations that will then go out and lobby for more of this. This will go into the pockets of the mega banks that are going to be in charge of the carbon trading system. This will go into the pockets of the big oil companies as they reduce emissions. They pump it into the CO2 emissions into the ground through the carbon capture pipelines. They'll get some nice big carbon credits. So this is basically a massive wealth transfer operation from the poor and the middle class in the Western world, including us, to the kleptocrats ruling over the third world, the mega banks, the Joe Biden cronies, the Cylinders of the world, etc. That's all it is. It's a thievery operation. It is grand theft on an international scale.
Are other
the elites
countries also
robbing us.
paying into this, Alex? Or other countries also paying into this for us?
So they have a formula that was approved back in the 1992 UNFC CCC, and that is you have developing countries and developed countries. Under the formula, communist China, which by the way emits 3 times more CO2 than the United States of America, they're a developing country. So they are on the receiving end of the funds. The developed countries would be what we used to call Christendom, the free world back in the day, right? Some of us still remember that from the Cold War days. What we today sometimes call the Western world. It's essentially Western Europe, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, South Korea to a lesser extent, maybe Taiwan if they can finagle some money out of them. So basically the countries that have lived under slightly freer markets, the countries that have produced more wealth because of better government. And we're not talking here about, George Soros and Bill Gates and the Rockefellers. They're not going to pay any money into this. They have all their money hidden in tax-exempt foundations anyway. This is the middle class in what used to be called the free world or Christendom.
Yeah. And like, just to put this into perspective again for everybody, India, the world's 5th largest economy, is still considered a developing nation in this. So they'll get a wealth transfer from us. And this isn't good for the developing countries either. The example I listened to a podcast on this over the weekend, and one of the examples they gave was a lot of these third world countries that are pushing for modern technology, that want better access, better jobs for their own people. Same thing we would want for ourselves, given being in that position. A lot of them, they're going to be forced now not to go into different industries that would create wealth, generate real value for their country, and instead, subsistence agriculture. So there is no real improvement. It's just a wealth transfer from our pockets to theirs. So a bunch of these billionaires and bureaucrats can talk about how wonderful they are and how they're saving the planet, despite the fact that every apocalyptic prediction they've made for the last 60 plus years has never come anywhere close to true, that it's all just about scare tactics, fear mongering, and it's a giant money laundering operation.
That's exactly right. It's a perfect description. And for the specific mechanics of this, Andrew and I have done quite a few articles available at thenewamerican.com. I just posted one this morning, UN climate deal, OK's carbon markets and trillions in reparations. So you can kind of get the nitty gritty on what this means, but it is hugely significant. It is one of the most important stories happening anywhere in the world right now. And it is going to bite all of us if we're not very careful here, especially with the Republican surrender monkeys in Congress ready to raise the white flag and agree to all this. So,
yeah, I think it's important to mention too, Mike, and Alex touched on this as well, that, most people have no idea what this is or what it's about. They've never heard of COP29. They've never heard of Azerbaijan. They've never heard of any of these terms before. And, the United States funds roughly a third of the United Nations bill and pays for all of their craziness. And when you go over there and you go to the COP event, I mean, I was just stunned by the buses and the merch, and everybody's wearing a COP29 branded windbreaker and a water bottle, and they've got the roads paved with new lanes, and the lanes say COP29, and they've got all of these projections and signs. I mean, the amount of money that went into this is insane. At the airport, they have big COP29 pillars, and it has a QR code, and it says offset your travel emissions, offset your CO2 emissions. And I actually scanned that QR code to see how much it would cost for us to offset our particular trip to get to Azerbaijan, and the UN wanted a $115 donation to offset our emissions. And when I looked into what they would do with that money, it just said that it would go to high impact climate initiatives that the UN was a part of. And as Alex said, it's just a wealth redistributing scam. It actually has nothing to do with saving the planet. And when you even look at the semantics of how they frame the debate, when you look at the term climate change, this is something that just struck me, was that they've set it up so that they can't lose. It used to be global warming. Some people called it global cooling. Now it's just climate change. So if the climate gets warmer, they win. If it gets colder, they win. If it stays the same, that would be unusual as well. So they win. And it's all about just getting the money, getting the bank in the bag so that they can bring about global government. But it's important for the American people, I think, to understand as well that we have one of the best opportunities that we've ever had to get out of this scam. As Alex mentioned, Donald Trump has made this a big point in his campaign. And I actually think you have the clip, Mike, of Donald Trump talking about why this is a hoax, why this is a scam. Donald Trump won 312 electoral votes. He won the popular vote by over 5 million. Naturally, you would assume that whatever his climate policy is probably in line with what the American people think on the issue. So I think it's worth listening to. Here's Donald Trump talking about the climate scam. Mike, if you have that clip.
Yep. Let me go ahead and get this run, and then
we don't have a global warming problem. They don't use that term anymore anyway, because as you can see, the planet, it's very cool out here today, isn't it? Oh, they go crazy when I say it. But it's not global warming, because at certain points it starts to cool a little bit, like now, but like this period. And they're getting killed with global, so they changed it. You know what the term is? Climate change. This way, if it gets warmer, it's fine. If it gets cooler, if it rains, if snow comes down in the middle of the summer, it's climate change, And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars on things that, putting windmills all over these magnificent plains and fields and valleys and oceans. And then they had one whale in, I think, 50 years come up. And then last year, they had like 18 of them wash ashore, die. And it's all a big hoax.
Yeah. Well, he's exactly right. We've got to take a quick break here from our sponsors, and then I want to get back to this so we can get a response from everybody. Give me 1 second here. All right, guys, we'll be right back with more.
Hey, folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy, and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
If I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's feeling with more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. And the best way to support our program, to support Alex Newman's Liberty Report and all the programs here on Patriot TV is by supporting our sponsors. So please do that and help us to continue to grow this network so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And sorry, Andrew, I think I kind of cut you off there before we went to break. So Donald Trump's exactly right. He sees it for what it is. It is a giant scam, and that's all it's ever been. They've made so many predictions. Al Gore told us the world world was going to end in December, or whatever it was, December 10th, 2012. We're well past that deadline. Greta Thunberg predicted the world would end in 2020. We're 4 years out. No explanation, no apology, no anything. It's the same scam they always pay. You're exactly right. This is just they see it as a giant money magnet that they know kids are being brainwashed in our schools to believe this nonsense. By the time they're old enough to look into it or do anything about it, they've already paid $1 gazillion in taxes. That's the fraud. What am I missing there, Andrew?
Well, you're not missing anything. That's exactly right. And as Donald Trump said, it's a scam. He even used the word trillions. Of course, that's right. And when we were talking with people on the ground, these are the people who have booths. These are the vendors. These are the smaller people who, and I don't say smaller like they're less significant, but they're smaller on the totem pole at these COP29 conferences. They really believe that climate change is real. They really believe they need to save the planet. But when you actually talk to them, there was one gentleman, we got him on tape. We did an interview. It's on thenewamerican.com. He was a German man, a Hindu, and he was talking about how the weather was getting worse and how the storms are getting worse. So we told him we were from Florida, and he's like, oh, Florida just got hit by some of the worst hurricanes ever. And Alex said, well, actually, no, the worst hurricane in Florida was over a century ago. And he's like, what? They don't know what they're talking about. Trump even mentioned the whales. One funny thing we observed was that in tandem with the Azerbaijani government and the United Nations, this guy called Captain Boomer Collective set up a fake 52-foot sperm whale on the shore of the Caspian Sea. It was a stunt to show that whales were being redirected and beaching and dying because of climate change. And all these poor Azerbaijani people were coming up to this whale, hyper realistic. They even hid buckets of dead fish to make it reek and smell like it was rotting. And these poor Azerbaijani people are coming up and they're like, oh my gosh, how did this whale get here? And they say, oh, we found him 3 days ago. He died because of climate change. It's a good thing that the world leaders are gathering at COP29 just a couple kilometers away to fix all of this. And we ended up interviewing one of the scientists, and he gave us the whole dog and pony show about climate. But when we started asking about things that actually harm whales, like offshore wind and windmills, which have been proven to send vibrations into the ocean, mess with whales, drive them crazy, and actually kill them, they knew nothing of the sort. They didn't know any actual threats to whales. And as these people at COP know nothing about the real data on climate change, they just know the lines that they've been fed to them through the government propaganda machines, their own governments, and they go along with it. And I feel bad for them, but as the resistance, as the insurrectionists, if you want to call us that, since we're on this great show, we need to be equipped with the real data. Like, no, guys, the worst storms actually weren't hitting Florida this year. It was over a century ago. No, the climate does change. It's always done that. And we're actually seeing less deaths as a result of natural disasters. And we need to be armed with the facts, but we also need to be armed with the reality that this isn't about climate change. It's about globalism. And if these people want to save the planet, what they actually need to be doing is saving the planet from totalitarian dictators who want to control their lives, control their money, control their freedoms, and fight back against this nonsense. So this should just be a call to people who are on the right side to study up, to know the facts, to be able to offer a counter narrative to all this climate nonsense, because this isn't going away. Even if Donald Trump does everything we'd want him to do in his second administration, this issue isn't going to die with that. It's going to continue to live on. And just one final thing before I wrap up this thought. We talked to a lot of people at the UN, and they're now starting to focus on local action. They want to take climate change to the local level. And even in Florida, I was looking at it last night. A very close city to mine, Miramar City Beach. It's a very conservative area. They are on the ICLEI, which is a local county initiative to get people involved in sustainability and green cities and all that. They are on board with the climate nonsense. Tons of counties in Florida are, as are tons of counties and cities across the United States. So don't think just because we won at the national level with the election of Donald Trump that this is going away. These people will start to play the grassroots, bottom-up gameplay as a result of this win to continue the climate nonsense. So the fight is just beginning.
It absolutely is. And, really quick, I want to clear some chats really quick. Shout out to JD in the Twitter chat, Texas Cutie on True Social, FG in the Getter chat, True Social Boomer over here in the Rumble chat. Appreciate all you guys. There's one thing, though, I think that we're kind of missing. You alluded to it earlier when you mentioned that this was, the Senate doesn't have to ratify this because they had previously ratified stuff with the UN or whatever. But we have control. We not only have President Trump at the top, we have 53, I think, or we have a majority in the Senate of Republicans, not conservatives, but Republicans. Same in the House. I wonder, if they really wanted to, could they not go back and actually change this stuff within the Senate and the House if the Republicans truly wanted to make it a priority? But as we know, I believe Alex had mentioned it earlier, that some of the Republicans were actually there at this event cheering it on. And so that's a major issue. But I think it's important that we actually hold our elected Republicans accountable if they're not going to do something about this, because we absolutely have the numbers to do something about it unless they are on, falling in line with this. And if so, they need to be outed and publicly shamed in the Republican Party for doing so and primaried and given the boot.
Yeah, Derrick, you just touched on something really important. And last year, I was at the UN Climate Summit in the United Arab Emirates, and a delegation of 7 U.S. senators showed up, 6 Democrats and 1 Democrat with an R next to her name, Lisa Murkowski. And yeah, true story. So I asked them during a press conference, hey, guys, there's a real prospect Donald Trump is coming back to the White House. The polls show most Americans don't even believe the hypothesis that underpins this whole thing, right? There had just been a poll released by the AP North Center for Public Affairs Research showing that a significant majority of Americans even rejected the whole global warming hypothesis. Less than 1 in 3 Republicans believed it. Only about 1/3 of Americans were willing to pay a single dollar on their monthly electricity bill to fight climate change. So everything was going against them. And so I asked them in the most respectful way possible, how are you guys running around here like Santa Claus on crystal meth, promising all these trillions of dollars and you're going to do this and that and the other? And Senator Ben Cardin, who led that delegation, he is the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, kicked the question over to Senator Chris Coons. And at the time, I thought Senator Chris Coons was just being a pompous, arrogant, typical member of Congress. He said, hey, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and with the Inflation Reduction Act, we're sending billions of dollars to Republican states, to Republican congressional districts, and they're doing all kinds of projects with that money now. And he didn't specify, but he's talking solar panel factories, windmill projects, carbon capture, carbon pipeline, carbon storage, and sequestration. So he said, don't worry about it. We've got them all hooked, and we're going to continue regardless of who is the next president of the United States. And I thought, man, this guy is a pompous, you-know-what. And turns out a year later, we've got 5 Republicans showing up at this thing and saying, oh, yeah, we're doing a great job reducing our CO2 emissions, and we're going to keep part of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act if it helps us lower emissions. I mean, unbelievable. So, yes, the short answer to your question, of course, Republicans could stop all this. They could stop it in a heartbeat. The House of Representatives has the purse strings. The House of Representatives could have stopped this last year if they wanted. All they had to do was put into the budget bills not 1 penny of this money may be used for anything relating to climate change, except maybe to shut down all the offices and bureaus and sell off all the equipment. Instead, they've continued to provide funding for this. And unfortunately, Senator Chris Coons was exactly right. They have now built a constituency in all these Republican jurisdictions for more of this nonsense. So it's going to take some really strong leadership from Donald Trump to stop this. I did talk to right here on Patriot TV on my show Liberty Report. I talked to the former EPA chief of staff during Trump's first term, Mandy Gunasekaran, I think her name is. And she explained that she was the one who was the architect of getting us out of the Paris Agreement. And I asked her at the very end, I didn't want to be offensive, but I asked her, why did you guys play along with this silly idea that we're bound by the Paris Agreement, that we have to wait 4 years to get out of it? And, why'd you guys do that? And she said, hey, that's a really good point. I'm glad you asked that question. Next time around, not only are we going to not play along with this stupid Paris Agreement, we're going to try to get us out of the UNFCCCC, the underlying treaty that, by the way, passed in very, very shady circumstances that underpins this whole project. So there are good people within the administration who have the right ideas. We need to encourage them. And even more importantly, perhaps, we need to lean on our Republican members of Congress and tell them, look, no more of this stuff. You're not going to get away by saying, oh, we also believe in oil when you're working with criminals to loot the American people for carbon emission reductions. So we've got our work cut out for us for sure.
Yeah, and you are exactly right. And unfortunately, so is Chris Coons. I mean, this is a model they know works. This is exactly what they've done with our education system. They get their hooks into local government, and then they use, and initially maybe that's all well and good. The federal funds are coming in, it's covering their school lunches and other things. But eventually, it comes time to pay them back. They've already got their hooks in you. Then they tie school lunches to whether you're going to let men in the women's restroom and vice versa, and opening up the changing rooms, putting these books in their in their library. So they hold them hostage, but funds they've come to rely on, whether that's at a local level with the government or anywhere else, or penalize them if they withdraw from it, have a huge surcharge for them to leave, make it impossible for them to leave these agreements once they've made them with the feds. So we're, as citizens, is there anywhere in particular where we should start applying pressure? Should we each be just blowing up our congressman's phone? Because we should withdraw from all this. I mean, the Department of Government Efficiency has talked about wanting to cut $2 trillion in waste. And when you start adding all this up, I wouldn't be surprised if we're already at $500 billion that we're wasting on this climate nonsense right now that gets them a quarter of their way to their goal, and they haven't even hit all the waste in the Pentagon yet.
Yep. And if you factor in also the costs for this in terms of lost productivity, the shutting down of our factories, the shipping of our industrial base to China, we're way into the trillions. And so to your question, I would say everybody, your average American doesn't even know who their member of Congress is. Start with step one, look up your member of Congress. Step two, figure out where they are at on this. The New American's got the Freedom Index. That's a really easy way to see whether your congressman is voting constitutionally. But find out where they stand on this climate issue and then call their office. Demand a meeting. Get together with 5, 10, 15 other people in your community and say, hey, Congressman, we want a meeting when you're back in the district. We demand a meeting. We want to talk to you about this climate hoax. Go in there armed with the facts. You need to know about this UN agreement. You need to know about the pseudoscience that underpins it all. You need to know about the different scams that are at work here. And when you talk to your congressman, say, look, this is a really important issue. We are not going to tolerate a representative for this district who buys into the hoax that human emissions of CO2 are pollution. CO2 is the gas of life. Human emissions of CO2 represent a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases naturally in the atmosphere. We exhale about 2 pounds of it every day. The world needs more CO2, not less. In fact, plants, according to Donald Trump's climate advisor, Will Happer, are designed to live in an atmosphere with 4 to 5 times as much CO2 as we currently have. And so we're not going to play this game, Congressman. Either you work on defunding this and you vote against this whole scam and you stop extorting American taxpayers for this and destroying our economy, or we're going to find somebody to replace you, so prepare to be primaried.
Oh, yeah. Well, this carbon capture is another thing that really needs to get addressed here. I know in North and South Dakota, it's already creating major problems there with these carbon capture pipelines. And then I think was it Louisiana where they were testing the one and it ruptured and they had to clear out a small town because it pushed all the oxygen out of the area. I might have the wrong state. It might be Alabama. But I know this is something else that's basically been swept under the rug that happened a few years ago. Like, this is not only a bad idea, but it's extremely unsafe for the locals that are having to deal with it. Guys, we got to take one more break, and then when we get back, we'll jump right back into this.
Now we have it. Kingdom Crunch.
It's important to start breakfast off with a power-packed punch. You want a complete amino acid score, good protein. If you turn the label over and look at the back of the box, there is no added sugars in either one of these flavors, either peanut butter or acai bowl.
Peanut butter has 11 grams of high-quality protein. Acai bowl has 8. Peanut butter has 11 grams of carbohydrate, acai bowl 12, and both of them have a good solid fat content at 6 grams. Very filling, very healthy.
You will be fueling yourself with high quality fuel, starting off the day right. You can even use Kingdom Crunch as a snack in the middle of the day if you just have a craving and you want to eat something that is good for you, has a crunch, and doesn't have a lot of calories.
There you go. Diabetic friendly, keto friendly, paleo friendly, Kingdom Crunch, and
child friendly.
Hey, Patriot TV fans, feel like there's nothing on the radio for like-minded, intelligent people like yourself? Well, great news. Now you can stream Patriot TV on TuneIn during your drive to or from work. Whether you're stuck in traffic or cruising down the highway, you can catch every conversation from your favorite show hosts right in your car. No more mindless jibber-jabber. Tune in 24/7 on the road, at the gym, or wherever you are. Download the free TuneIn app now on Apple, Android, or your computer and never miss a beat. Patriot TV, now on TuneIn.
Thank you again for staying with us. And again, the best way to support our program, Alex's program, and all the Patriots here at Patriot TV is by supporting our sponsors. That's what allows us to stay on the air and keep bringing you the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. Andrew, one of the things you had mentioned the other day was just kind of, and I guess you did touch on this already, but just like the facade, this fakeness that they had, hiding the oil derricks and all of that, trying to make the whole area meet this pretend image. Can you kind of give our audience a little, go a little more into detail on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is one thing that no one would know unless somebody was there to tell you, because none of the media has covered this element of the COP29, which is that they really kind of discouraged private transportation. They had all these buses set up. They were green buses. And from what I could tell, they were gas-powered buses. I don't think they were solar or wind or anything like that, or battery
Maybe
powered.
they ran on cow farts.
Maybe they ran on cow farts. That I don't know. But they seem to be gas buses. So you take the little bus route. And like I said earlier, they had this new lane on the highway, the COP29 lane. And they actually had a very nice infrastructure set up for this event. But all of the roads that the press and the observers and maybe the delegates took were all manicured pristinely. Brand new flowers lining the roads, brand new walls lining the roads so that you couldn't see the consequences of decades of Marxism behind those walls, which were the slums, the packs of dogs, the kids setting up wooden structures to sell off fish they'd caught in the Caspian Sea. All that was behind the walls. So the elites driving the Land Rovers and the G-Wagons and the Mercedes-Benz and the BMWs could look at the pleasant flowers driving to the COP Center. But Alex and I rented a car, and we actually drove beyond those walls, and we saw the real Azerbaijan. And that was full of poverty. That was full of, like I said, packs of dogs, children selling fish on the side of the streets. And we were driving to the COP summit on an alternative route, which was not a UN-approved route. No walls, no flowers, no COP29 lane. And you could actually see real Azerbaijani people because they were driving 1980s Ladas and old Volkswagens and old cars, no BMWs, Mercedes, Lamborghinis, that sort of thing. And we started to see all of this steel, and it was moving. And we're like, oh my gosh, are these oil rigs? So of course they were oil rigs. And funny enough, they had a COP29 sign in front of all of the oil rigs. So we actually pulled over and got a picture of the COP29 sign with the oil rigs behind it. And that'll be published in the New American Magazine. So all of it's a facade, and 90% of Azerbaijan's exports are oil, by the way. So they have no intention of going green, but they do have intention of globalism. And, shifting gears here for a second, we talked about Trump and we talked about the Republicans in Congress and just kind of this very weak stance on climate. Even Viktor Orban, who I actually really like, leader of Hungary, he's been called the Donald Trump of Central Europe. He was at COP29 and he actually said, quote, "Hungary has done its homework. We decreased our CO2 emissions, invested heavily in green energy, and support companies to be energy effective. But the green energy transition cannot be achieved at the expense of our farmers and companies." So he's doing the same thing the GOP did. He's saying, yeah, we'll reduce our CO2. Yeah, we'll go green. We'll try to be sustainable, but we're also going to support farmers and farmers and oil. So you can't do both. You have to either be, in my opinion, you have to be for the gas of life, CO2. You have to recognize that fossil fuels aren't fossil. They're actually a gift from God. Or you have to be one of these climate nuts. You can't do both. They don't coexist. And there's a lot of people, unfortunately, in Donald Trump's new administration who are playing that one foot on one side of the fence and the other foot on the other. Lee Zeldin is one of those. He's Donald Trump's pick for the head of the EPA. He was a part of the GOP climate caucus of congressional people who believed in climate change. Even Elon Musk, unfortunately, has been very heavy on the carbon tax idea, which is taxing people for emitting CO2, emitting carbon. And I think we have the clip, Mike. It's 7.5 on my notes of Elon actually talking to Leonardo DiCaprio. And funny enough, I actually have a magazine here that the UN was handing out called Climate Envoy, and it says Climate Champion Leonardo DiCaprio. And they hand this out. He's like a patron saint for these globalist goobers of climate change. And we have Elon Musk, unfortunately, on tape giving Leonardo DiCaprio a tour of one of Starlink's, I believe it was either Starlink or Tesla's, one of their green energy facilities. So, Mike, if you have that clip 7.5 of Elon touting carbon tax, I think that'd be an edifying thing to share.
Yep, here we go.
I mean, the fossil fuel industry is the biggest industry in the world. They have more money and more influence than any other sector. So, I mean, the more that there can be sort of a popular uprising against that, the better. But I think the scientific fact of the matter is we are unavoidably headed towards some level of harm. So the sooner we can take action, the less harm will result. And we actually did the calculations to say, like, what would it take to transition the whole world to sustainable energy? What kind of throughput would you actually need? And you need 100 gigafactories. So
100 of these?
100 of these, yes.
That would make the United States...
No, the whole world.
The whole world?
The whole world. All energy.
That's it?
Yeah.
That sounds...
It's manageable.
That sounds manageable.
Yeah. So Tesla can't build 100 gigafactories. The thing that's really going to make difference is if companies that are much bigger than Tesla do the same thing. If the big industrial companies in China and the US and Europe, the big car companies, if they also do this, then collectively we can accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. And if government sets the rules to favor sustainable energy, we can get there really quickly. But it's really fundamental. Unless there's a price put on carbon,
we're never going to be able to make the transition that we need to in time, correct?
Yeah. And the only way to do that is basically with a carbon tax.
So I don't know if people caught that, but if government sets the rules, Elon said, then we'll be able to transition to sustainable energy. So I like Elon. I actually really appreciate a lot that he's done for our movement. I think what he's done on X is fantastic. It might have saved free speech for a period of time in the United States of America. So very appreciative to him for that. He played a big role in the re-election of Trump. Again, very appreciative. But we need to recognize that there are a lot of people around the president who have this pro-sustainable, pro-green, pro-solar wind, anti-oil, anti-fossil fuel, anti-CO2 mentality. And that's not what Trump has articulated that his beliefs are. We played at the beginning of the show what Trump thought on climate change. He has been consistent on that viewpoint. So that's what the people elected. That's what the people have mandated for the climate policy of the United States through electing Donald Trump. And we need to be very weary of people who might come in and subvert that agenda and get us on the sustainability path that ultimately is anti-life.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, Trump, some of these people that Trump has surrounded himself with definitely make me nervous. And with Elon, you know, hopefully his views on energy are evolving the way many of its others are as the left continues to hammer and push back. But, you know, these are not realistic goals. Building 100 gigafactories, that's trillions and trillions of dollars and lots of private investment, private capital. But it also means that you're going to hold back most of the third world. They want the same, luxuries that we enjoy here. They want to be able to keep the lights on 24 hours a day. They want clean water, access to food, things like that. You're not going to get that. And what you're going to get instead is more abuse of people working in these lithium mines and other things, trying to get the rare earth metals they need for all these solar panels. We've already seen the failure with the wind industry. I mean, this is where Republicans, I guess, need to be more articulate. Like, none of us want dirty air, dirty water, or companies dumping their waste wherever, but they like to conflate that with this this idea that somehow we're going to burn the planet up if we don't change things. Like, right now, we do not have the technology to eliminate oil, because it isn't just the energy it provides, all the plastics, it goes into making medicines, it goes into all sorts of things that we need to survive or maintain the lifestyle that we have. And I'm not willing to make those kind of sacrifices, take these giant steps backwards to achieve their goal. This would reduce the average lifespan of people. We would not have the luxuries that we all enjoy today. And that's something that needs to be clearly articulated. We need to present this fork at the road in a way that the average person understands it, and that'll help us all to leverage and put more pressure on these fools in government that have bought into this pipe dream.
Well, and Crooked Joe, it's his name on Twitter here, says the irony is that China will get our money and then lend it back to us with interest.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening right now. I go, truly think about that for a second. Let that sink in, because they're considering a developing country under this, a little agreement. So we're sending money to China, and then they're going to lend it back to us with interest. I mean, you can't even make this up right now.
Yeah, that actually touches on, I think, one of the biggest points of this that people are not getting. And I just really want to hammer this point home, folks. You're watching the controlled demolition, not just of the United States and our economy and our military and our diplomacy and our energy systems and our agricultural systems. You're watching the controlled demolition of the old world order. And over a decade ago, I watched the Council on Foreign Relations, which is, I call it deep state headquarters. In fact, in my book on the deep state, I identify it as probably the top outpost of deep state activity here in the United States. They started pushing this idea that we needed to move toward a multipolar world order, that it wasn't fair that the U.S. is the unchallengeable global hegemonic power that it has been since the aftermath of World War II, that it was time for a multipolar world order, where instead of one single pole of power, being the United States, we would move toward multiple poles of power, including Beijing as one of the key ones. And they acted like this was some organic process that was just happening naturally. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is an engineered process. It involves the destruction of the United States as the single most powerful player, because, of course, we are based on the principles that come from the Bible, that God endowed us each with unalienable rights, that the purpose of government is to protect those rights. You can't have a world order based on a country with those ideas at its core when you want to build a totalitarian global political, economic, and religious system. So as we move toward this multipolar world order, you're going to see scams like the climate change, chief among them, being used to deindustrialize the United States, deindustrialize the Western world, and transfer our economic capabilities over to places like China. And of course, as our economy is destroyed, that will destroy our military. As Communist China's economy is built up, that will enable them to build the aircraft carriers, the nuclear weapons, the surveillance systems, etc., to really fundamentally reshape everything. So what we're watching here is not anything to do with climate. Climate is the excuse, it's the pretext. What's happening here is grand theft, but also the restructuring of the world order away from the old system to the new one, which, as George Soros explained in an interview with the Financial Times over a decade ago, Communist China needs to own the new world order in the same way that the United States owned the previous one. That's really what's happening here. So people look at this and they think, wow, Joe Biden must be an idiot. Well, Joe Biden may or may not be an idiot, but the people pulling his strings know exactly what they're doing. This is a deliberate betrayal of the United States of America, a deliberate building up of Communist China for the purpose of restructuring the world order.
You're exactly right, Alex. You articulated that perfectly. What they really want is the world to go back to essentially a serfdom, where they control all of us. They determine what we do, what we're able, if we're able to travel or not, how much energy we're able to use, and then these few people that view themselves as elites at the top, they want to dominate the rest of society and just determine what we do. They want to go back to essentially like a kingdom where they have control over all of us. The little people will do what they want, will produce what they want, work in the industries that they want, and they will reap the benefits from that. They'll continue to live this lifestyle like they do, eating steak and chicken, everything else they want, flying on their private jets. The rest of us will be forced to eat the cricket paste and live under their thumb, under their boot. You really could see a return to things where it's lights off at 10 p.m. because they don't want to run the power plant any longer. This is the world that they envision. They want to be the stewards over the rest of us, making our decisions for us while they continue to enrich themselves and have their fantasies about where the direction the world should go. And this is all tied together, including with the one world religion that the UN is also pushing.
Yep. And the one world religion thing, I know we're coming up on the clock here, but this is one of the most critical things. I was at the UN COP29 in Egypt. They held it on the Sinai Peninsula for very strategic reasons. And one of the big takeaways from there, right before the conference started, the UN put out a report called Changing Times. And what they said in there was that the system of morality and ethics that had evolved with mankind over thousands of years, and of course they were talking about the Mosaic Law, the law that God revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, was no longer adequate for protecting Mother Earth from the ravages of humans and climate change and environmental damage. And so all these religious leaders, so-called, all the big religions you can think of, including, by the way, the Vatican and even some fake evangelical leaders, the Church of England was a big player, walked up to the top of Mount Sinai, or what they say was Mount Sinai, and they unveiled a new and supposedly improved 10 Commandments. And I actually caught up with the organizers of this abomination afterward. I wasn't able to walk up with them because the Egyptian government had security concerns. I had to go the next day. But I ran into the organizers of this at the UN summit and asked them on camera. I spent 40 minutes with these guys on camera and asked them about this. And they said, oh, not only do we have the new and improved 10 Commandments, we're now working on a new and improved covenant. Right, so God gave us the old covenant. God gave us the new covenant. UN and Friends is going to give us the third covenant. And they said we're going to use that to build the kingdom of heaven here on earth. So, folks, when the three-legged stool approach is fully understood, this is their terminology. First leg of the stool, governments. Second leg of the stool, business. Third leg of the stool, religion. You see that this is an all hands on deck, all the major institutions of the world marching in lockstep toward this. And then it's just people like us saying, absolutely not. We're not going to stand for it.
Wow. Yeah, and we're seeing this unfold before us. But unfortunately, our media here is on board. So your average normie that's in the middle that isn't paying attention doesn't realize to the same extent what's going on here. I bet there would be a lot more people outraged because you're exactly right. They're gaining control of all the levers of power, being able to control and infiltrate religious institutions to try to tell people this is the morally correct and godly path that the world should be taking, controlling the government, obvious, and then controlling business, same thing. We've seen a lot of these things implemented here, at least not through government, but through companies. And this is your ESG, your debanking people. Derrick, you've been a victim of this. I know many others have too, that you hold the wrong political beliefs. They say you're somebody that would stand against globalism, you'll be debanked. And again, they put everybody in a position where there is no good way to fight back. It's why we have to get ahead of this now and stop it before it gets completely out of control and we're all under the boot of a globalist government. I'm going to fight back with whatever means we still have at that point. The World Health Organization, they want to roll out passports or control over passports, control over your medical records, forced vaccinations. And this is, again, it's all part of their plan. They're attacking at all sides. And if we don't stand up now and stop it, we won't have an opportunity to in the future. Any parting words of wisdom? Andrew, we'll go to you first, and then go ahead.
I think that this is ultimately a spiritual battle. I'm a Christian, and I believe that God created the earth in 6 days, and it was good, as the scripture says. And when you want to know if somebody's for God or against God, you can look at their actions. And this whole globalist movement under the United Nations, as it currently be, is doing everything to the contrary of what scripture prescribes. There's not a single thing that the United Nations has put out on any topic, whether it be climate, whether it be education, whether it be marriage, whether it be anything, that is in lockstep and tandem and agreement with what the Bible says. It's the opposite of what the Bible says. So we know that globalism actually is something the scripture has talked about. It was tried at the Tower of Babel. All these countries came together. They tried to make this tower to be like God. And the Lord responded and said, nope, different languages, different nations, borders dispersed. So we have, as believers, if you're a believer in the Bible and Jesus Christ, a understanding of what the world should be ordered as, and it's as sovereign nations with sovereign people in those nations giving up their some liberties to the governing authorities to be able to protect God-given freedoms. That government doesn't give rights, they don't give freedoms, but they protect them because they come from God. And this whole globalist push has been the opposite of what the Bible says. So ultimately, it's a war on God. And I think we have to, as Americans, understand that this isn't purely political, but it's also spiritual. And when you put it in that lens, our response to it and then the severity of it comes very much into focus.
Well said. Alex, we got about 30 seconds. Any parting words? And then where can our audience find you here on Patriot TV?
Thank you very much. Folks, get educated on this. Be in prayer. Be reading your Bible. You can sign up for our newsletter for free at libertysentinel.org. Also, get over to newamerican.com for our COP29 coverage. Get a subscription to the magazine. And thank you, gentlemen, for having us. Always a pleasure. And God bless you all.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you for all the work you do. To our audience, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And we'll be back again tomorrow with even more.